You are listening to Season 16, Episode 12 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast, featuring Martti Malmi, the first Bitcoin developer to join Satoshi back in 2009. This episode is sponsored by Layer 2 Labs, Sideshift.ai, Bitcoin.com News, Citrea, NoOnes.com, and Hodling.ch. One thing that I have to mention is that we recorded this interview back in May of 2024 during Pizza Day at Parallelny Police, so some of the ideas expressed might be slightly dated. But nonetheless, I've decided to keep this interview and publish it on a special occasion. I hope you'll enjoy it because Marty really doesn't do a lot of interviews. He doesn't like to talk a lot. He's rather introverted. But I do believe that in this interview he gave some interesting answers, and much more than that, this interview will help you understand the mindset of the people who contributed to Bitcoin very early on, and what kind of expectations they had, and what kind of work they might be doing today. So, enjoy. Hello there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I'm Vlad, and I'm here today with Sirius, who was the first Bitcoin developer in the world and one of the people who spoke with Satoshi. And his real name is Martti Malmi. He's from Finland. He was in university when he first discovered Bitcoin. And he even advised Satoshi, who was complaining to him, how to present the project to the peer-to-peer foundation forum when it was announced for the second time in 2009. And there's quite a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start. These days, you're working on a Nostr client, which is called Iris.
Yes.
And to you, is Nostr just as exciting as Bitcoin was back in the day?
Yeah, it is, in a way. But Bitcoin started pretty small, and when I joined, Nostr was already pretty big. I started working on... Well, I had worked on Iris for a fairly long time, since 2019 or something, but on a different stack. Then 2022, Jack Dorsey started using Nostr, and then that's when it got popular, and I made Iris a Nostr client. It was already technically very similar, so it happened quickly.
I was one of the first people to test Nostr because I'm friends with Ben Ark. And he added me to a Telegram chat where there was Ben Ark, there was Fiat Jeff, there was, what's his name? Melvin Carvalho, Rockstar Dev, and a bunch of others who were coming up with ideas, brainstorming how they can build. Their idea at the time was mostly political. They wanted to build a version of Twitter that is much better than Mastodon and cannot be politically censored. So that's how they came up with the idea. And Nostr, if I'm not mistaken, stands for nodes and other stuff.
Transmitted over relays.
Transmitted over relays, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the only actually self-custodial social network, as far as I know, where the accounts are just public keys, just like your Bitcoin wallet, and you don't need a service provider. No one can take it away from you. And actually, the transmitted over relays part is optional as well. You can use whatever transport. You could send the signed messages on floppy disks in mail or Bluetooth or whatever peer-to-peer configuration.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I feel sorry for losing my keys because I tested it very early on. It was a client called Brandle, made by Fiat Jeff. And I created that. I just saved the keys in my browser history. And of course, I got a new computer and I transferred the data. And then I realized, okay, I lost my keys. No big deal. I made a new account like 2 or 3 years ago when it had a resurgence. But I still regret that. I mean, I still have the public key. I can identify that one, but I don't have my public key anymore.
But you can just backdate the posts. There's no open timestamps or anything, so you can just make new posts on the dates.
Oh yeah, but that sort of defeats the purpose. I just wanted to have one of these first created accounts. I think I was one of the first 100 people to use Nostr, and it's exciting because I wasn't one of the first people to discover Bitcoin. And when I heard about it the first time, I thought it was a stupid idea. And it took me... So I was 21 years old when I first heard about Bitcoin, and this was the year 2013, yeah. So it was when that bull market was happening, and I saw a meme on the internet. I was scrolling a lot of meme pages in university. It was called 9gag.com. And I saw a joke about, so someone was trying to rob someone else, saying, hey, give me all your money. And that person said, I don't have any money, I just have Bitcoin. And then the thief basically gave him some dollars, being like, oh, I feel so sorry for you. And I saw that, and I was like, what's Bitcoin? So I searched for it, and I read a bit about it, and I said, this is not for me. It was the era of the Silk Road, I guess. I was thinking, so this technology is being used to send money to anyone else around the world. And I was thinking, yeah, the narrative which was dominant at the time was to bank the unbanked. And I was thinking, I already have a bank account, so why would I need this? What's the point? I was super naive in my assumptions because I thought I can send money to anyone around the world when in fact I can't even withdraw all of my money from my account. I mean, I didn't have enough money to reach the limits, but once you start making more and you're thinking, do they really have my cash inside of these ATMs, or can I get everything? No, you can't. If you want to close your bank account, they're going to schedule a call with the bank manager, and you're going to have to explain why you want to do this and why you want your money in cash, which is strange. So it wasn't until I actually started working at the age of 25 that I understood the value. No, I was 24, that I understood the value of Bitcoin. But I kept following it, and I wrote about this in my magazine. I told you about it. And I started from this idea that I thought it was a stupid idea, and it took me a few years of just stumbling upon it once again until I gave it a chance. And I don't want other people to get the same roadblocks, to follow the same process, because I think we as humans should learn from each other's mistakes if we want to actually evolve. Otherwise, we're just going to be repeating the same cycles, which is not a good idea. But I admire you because you saw something in Bitcoin that nobody else has in a time when it was just software published on a page and it was only for Windows.
Yeah.
How did you discover this?
So I wanted to change the world through technology rather than politics. And I figured money would be the most impactful thing to change because everything runs on money. Economy runs on money. And I tend to agree with the theory that even our culture and the whole society runs like downstream from economy. Bad money can create a lot of bad culture, and Bitcoin can fix it. So I went looking for monetary alternatives. There were some centralized options like Pecunix and Liberty Dollar and whatever. Some of them were like, trust me, bro, we have gold in our vaults. Mm-hmm. Then I guess Liberty Dollar was later shut down by the government. They were all centralized, but I guess I was Googling for something like peer-to-peer currency, and then Bitcoin came up and had just been published. There was this plain and simple bitcoin.org page, and I read the white paper, took some time to digest it, and sent email to Satoshi to offer help.
Was it really that easy to go from someone who stumbles upon this idea to becoming a developer for the project?
Yeah, well, I guess it took a couple weeks, like, to research this stuff or more. But yeah, Satoshi gave me like right away gave me access to the SourceForge, bitcoin.sourceforge.net page, which was empty at that time. Open source contributors are usually valuable, so better be accommodated.
And for people who don't know, before Bitcoin was on GitHub, it was on SourceForge.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone still maintains that repository on SourceForge, but it's interesting how this all started. So it took you 2 weeks to go from someone who first discovered Bitcoin to coding for it. But do you remember what was your first contribution to the project?
Well, actually, he first asked me to do FAQ and some texts for the website and stuff like that. Then later I set up the forums. You can read our email exchange, which you can find it on my Twitter, for example. There's a lot of exciting discussion about WordPress configurations and whatever CMS or forum software we used. So that's what I did first. And during the summer of 2009, I also got the code compiled on my computer and started making some minor UI features, mostly like minimize the tray, and start on system boot, so more people would stay online and keep the network running. And also worked on the Linux port, although Satoshi did some of that as well.
That's interesting because I've spoken with Brian Bishop, and he told me that he found out about Bitcoin because he was on the mailing list. And when he saw it's on Windows, he was like, oh, this is a piece of crap. Why would anyone want to build a future of money on Windows? And he didn't actually get involved until there was a proper Linux port. So I guess you're important in this regard because you got a lot of people involved when Bitcoin came to Linux.
I hope so.
Oh, you know so, because it's empirical evidence.
Yeah, and I needed it for my own server because I wanted to build, and later I did build an exchange service, bitcoinexchange.com, where I needed this API to create Bitcoin payment addresses. So it was not like an order book style page. It was basically just me buying and selling with automated pricing, but it was not very profit oriented. I didn't want to go through the hassle of accounting and paying taxes, so I didn't want to take any profit from the business or the venture or whatever. So I just had some automated pricing script, and I ended up having 30,000 Bitcoin less when I ended the exchange than when I started it.
At the time, how much was 30,000 Bitcoin?
Not too much. Could have been like 2,000 euro or less. Like usually the orders were pretty small at bitcoinexchange.com, like someone buys or sells for 20 euros. But I remember when I got someone first purchased Bitcoin for 1,000 euros, and I was like, whoa, this is getting crazy. I think he got like 10,000. Like I used some exponential curve for the pricing algorithm, so the more you wanted to buy, the more the unit price would be.
At the time, there was no other third party to tell you what the price is, so you had to determine it according to your own criteria.
Yeah, I guess there was New Liberty Standards, the exchange, the web page. The guy whom I sold the first known Bitcoin to USD transaction, where he bought 5,000 Bitcoin for 5 USD from me.
Yeah.
yeah, he maintained this website with price listings and specialty shop where you could buy SpongeBob stickers and other specialties.
You know what's funny about this story? I mean, there's also the one about you buying an apartment, which I think makes you a pioneer in buying real estate with Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I bought euros. I exchanged it for euros first, but yeah.
But what's funny about the story is that you'll get a lot of new Bitcoiners who will say, oh, this guy is such an idiot. You know, he had no conviction in this money system, no belief. He just sold it for $1 or whatever.
No, I don't get a lot of that. Everyone's like I would have sold as well. But my purpose was not to sell everything. I sold like a bit over half of my remaining. I had like maybe 20,000 Bitcoin left at that point, and I sold a bit over half of it. But then Bitcoin exchange rate dropped to like $2 that year, 2011, and I had to sell a lot of it at a low exchange rate. I had resigned from my job as a junior software developer, and finding a new job took longer than expected, and I went traveling to Japan and everything and burned too many Bitcoins. But I don't really feel like I've lost anything on this journey. Quite the contrary. And at least I got more than 2 pizzas.
It's funny because we are right now at Pizza Day, which is an event that celebrates Laszlo's purchase of 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. And we had pizza, we had drinks. This is Parallelny Police. I guess they're going to rebrand starting next year. I don't know about that. But it's a lot of fun, and it's a nice way to remember what this used to be about. And it's important to build markets, because people, if you're never going to sell, as some people claim these days, and are going to hold forever, you're not going to create the demand for the currency. You need people to actually own some coins for them to want more of it. If you just hoard them, and there are like 100 people around the world who use it, that's not how you scale it. That's not how you get more adoption. That's not how you increase the price. You need more people to want it. So how do they want it? They need to hold some at first, and then they understand what it is, and they're going to want more.
Yeah. Well, I could still have saved a few more.
Oh, really? You have some regrets about the way you spent your Bitcoin?
No, I mean, there's problems in life that money would solve, but sometimes it gets you thinking like, what if? But it's no use spending time dwelling on the past. Future is the thing you can change.
And the present,
yeah.
Not just the future. It's what you start doing now.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating how those days were. And I was going to ask you something else, but before that, so I have some sponsors. I can just play the audio on top of this.
Hold up a minute. Did someone just pay you in stablecoins? Swap that CBDC wannabe for free market, scarce, and provably yours BTC with Sideshift.ai. Do you want to swap your BTC for something else? Use Sideshift, the direct-to-wallet exchange. It's fast, it has lots of liquidity for your needs, and the fees are lower than you might expect. Sideshift is also available via integrations with Trezor Suite and BTC Pay Server. Check out Sideshift.ai today. And yes, you can also use Sideshift to dump every other coin and token to make more BTC. Keep stacking, man. Sideshift.ai.
Hey Anon, when was the last time you got your Bitcoin news from news.bitcoin.com? Today, you can find some excellent reporting on topics related to mining and international legal issues. And if you are into researching the geopolitical impact of Bitcoin outside of the US, or you simply want to compare the performance of BTC against gold, silver, or natural gas, there's always some content for you. While other publications are more political and display a higher degree of partisanship, news.bitcoin.com is more neutral. So give it a try.
Wasabi wallet is really cool. It seems like a great business model as well, until you get cancelled by the government. I hope we can do improved Bitcoin privacy with other means that cannot be cancelled.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this because you were the first developer to work on Bitcoin, and you did some useful work. And Hal Finney, actually, he was the first developer, if we put it this way.
As far as I know, he did testing around the early days. I think he later contributed something to Bitcoin core code.
So he tweeted very famously that he's running Bitcoin. And then a week later, he said, looking for ways to improve privacy on Bitcoin. And I was thinking if you had similar thoughts around the time that you realized, okay, this is not really private.
Yeah, I didn't think too much about it at that time because we were under the radar at the time. I was aware that like it's a public ledger, so you need to be careful. But I'm just a web developer. I don't really know.
Did you look into other privacy proposals over the years and think, oh, this is so cool, we can have this in Bitcoin?
I don't know. Not really. I guess the important thing to me about Bitcoin has been like the challenging of the money printer first and foremost. Privacy is important, of course, as well. I guess Lightning already does its fair share. And here at Pizza Day, I've learned about Cashew, which is very interesting, like eCash. There's good stuff going on, which has been discussed here.
But I do believe that Bitcoin can challenge the money printer and still be completely KYC'd in the sense that every transaction has an identity and use custodians for most transactions. And I think that sort of defeats the purpose. I don't know, do you believe this or do you think it's fine?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we need privacy in money. And yeah, it's not sufficient just have a public ledger for every transaction.
Do you like layer 2 proposals for Bitcoin? Or is there anything that caught your attention recently?
Well, I'm not too deep into Bitcoin these days, mostly with Nostr's use of Lightning. Like Lightning is more or less integrated to all Nostr clients, including mine. So Nostr is good for finding people's Lightning addresses. And you can also zap posts, pay tip for posts on Nostr. That's quite powerful. I think that's something that Twitter might not be able to easily achieve because of KYC rules. So that's pretty cool that Lightning works. I just wonder if Lightning providers like Wallet of Satoshi are gonna be cancelled. I think they might be cancelled in the future.
Well, they did shut down their operations in the US.
Yeah.
And there was Phoenix, which is non-custodial, and they also shut down in the US. And that leaves us with important questions. Because, okay, we said it was bound to happen for custodial wallets because you can argue that they're money transmitters. But then you had an LSP, which actually doesn't hold the funds and only provides you the infrastructure for opening channels. And that one also gets shut down. And that makes you wonder, if you're going to run your own node, are you under the same threat?
Yeah. I guess it's more difficult shutting down individual nodes. I guess you're not a money transmitter if you only serve yourself. It might be safer if there's many people running nodes.
I think that was a point in the evolution of the Lightning Network. I was part of this movement. It was called Rings of Fire. And the idea was to get these Raspberry Pi nodes routed over Tor and open channels with each other in circles. And basically, everyone had at least one extra connection to which they could route transactions. So we all agreed to open channels in circles, and then someone had the channel with Bitrefill, someone had a channel with Blockstream or whatever, and we had a route to pretty much every major hub. But at one point, I think the hardware was not powerful enough, and there's also the reliability issue and the issue of forced closing of channels. And I think, at least in my case, I was not really earning any money from routing. I was maybe making 30 base units a month, so 1 Satoshi per day. So there was no sustainability, as some people promised in the beginning, that you can basically monetize or pay for the electricity of your Lightning node through this. And it's not even the reason why I shut down. It's just that I discovered that my payments were becoming less reliable, and it was easier for me to switch to an LSP like Phoenix, which charges you for the initial deposit when you do the swap from main chain to Lightning. Maybe has higher fees, but at the same time, it just works every time.
Yeah. I must admit, I've never run a Lightning node myself. I use Wallet of Satoshi. It works really well for events like this where you buy beer with Lightning.
Yeah, but people will argue it's not really Lightning. It's just an account.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There is no way to verify that you actually use the Lightning channel and you're not just transacting numbers from one server to the other. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bit scary. I do believe that the Wallet of Satoshi guys are nice and they don't break the rules. They don't create inflation, but there has to be a way to verify that.
Yeah, I wonder if we could have lots of these cash-you e-cash providers, like local small communities, like one server admin geek serving like the closest 200 people or something, or if that's gonna be outlawed as money transmitting as well.
I was going to ask you, did you buy alpaca socks or stuff like that in your early days, or Cassius coins?
No, unfortunately not. They were selling alpaca socks for 15 Bitcoin, or what was the price, something like that. And Cassius coins are valuable these days, I hear.
Yeah, they are. Nobody expected at the time for them to become this popular. There's some trust involved there that, Mike Caldwell, the guy who created them, might store on a notebook all the private keys that he ever issued. Like, you have to trust him that he's never going to rob his customers. But so far, he has an immaculate record. And I was going to ask you, back in the day, what was the preferred way to hold your coins? You didn't have too many choices. You just had Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin Core was the only choice for a long time. I don't even remember if... I guess it got some sort of wallet encryption, maybe, at some point. I don't even recall, but that's what I used back then, back in the day. Or Mt. Gox.
Mt. Gox, yeah. That was a very expensive lesson for Bitcoiners.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they lost 80% of their customer funds, but they had diamond hands for 10 years. So it's not a bad outcome for some creditors who might have sold their Bitcoins, if not for Mt. Gox.
That's a fair point, assuming that they're going to get paid in fiat and that there's going to be someone to actually make the payment. Because I'm not sure how many of them actually got their money back.
They say they're going to pay back this year. Some of the fiat is already paid back, and they're going to pay back. They're promising to pay back the Bitcoins this year. I know because I'm a creditor.
Oh, so you have to receive some Bitcoin from them?
Yeah, I guess it's public knowledge that they owe me 10 Bitcoins, which I'll get some of back.
I was just thinking, can you buy the same apartment that you bought for many more Bitcoins today with the 10 Bitcoins you're going to get from Mt. Gox?
No, I'm not going to get 10 Bitcoins. It's going to be less. But I think I might. I'm not going to be selling them anytime soon. I mean, Bitcoin has existed for 15 years. And just think how far we might be in 5 or 10 or 15 years.
where do you see the future of Bitcoin? Of course, you have this ideological perspective that it must stop the money printer, it must end wars, but how do you think it's going to function technologically? Do you think it's going to be the same Bitcoin core and everyone builds on top of it? Or do you think we might have some major changes in the way that it functions with new discoveries in cryptography and stuff?
I think and I hope it's going to be fairly resistant to change. I don't have a crystal ball and I don't work closely with Bitcoin these days, so I might not have the most informed opinion. But I tend to be optimistic about Bitcoin, about Nostr. Those are the rays of light in the darkness. Even though there's all this dystopian development going on with CBDCs, citizen scores, and whatever, and recently these Bitcoin attacks on Bitcoin developers by governments.
You basically triggered me to start a rant right now because there is Project Hamilton by MIT, and that's a CBDC pilot that they're trying to sell to the US government. And what MIT has been doing for longer than 10 years now was to get Bitcoin core developers and give them money to fund them to continue the work. But if you look at the white paper of Project Hamilton, you're going to see that they use the UTXO model from Bitcoin. They use Schnorr signatures just like they used in Bitcoin with Taproot. They use a lot of specifications from Bitcoin and they do reference them all the time. And they even use one of the developers, Corey Fields. He's a Bitcoin core developer. He also collaborated in the white paper and the technical implementation of Project Hamilton. And it makes you wonder, like all of these actors have been nice and benevolent, but then they're going to take the technology and turn it into something that Bitcoin is trying to oppose and was created to oppose.
Yeah, that's interesting. And why don't they just use Tether? I guess Tether is already... they don't have full control over it, but it's a bit like an extension of the United States dollar. And it's interesting that Tether is still running in some way.
Well, it's not interesting and it's not conspirational to look into the treasury and see that Tether is the company that buys 80-something% of its holdings in U.S. Treasury bonds.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're an investor in the U.S. government. Of course, they're not going to get shut down because they hold huge amounts of it. If you ask the Tether people, they're going to say, oh, we're just getting infiltrated. We're like a Trojan horse. But if you look at the way it operates, it's no different from a CBDC. They can seize funds. They can stop redemptions. It's them who are in the middle of everything. Peg-ins, peg-outs. They're not called like this. Issuances and redemptions. They issue Tether to a client because they want to transfer money. There are some transfers in the middle, and at the end, I guess some exchange does the redeem part. But in some countries, for example, my girlfriend is from Iran, and she told me this week that they banned Tether in Iran. I was like, why did you not see this coming? And she was shocked, like, how can they do this? I thought it was technology like Bitcoin. It's not.
Yeah, I wonder which direction the Trojan horse is going. Is it like the US government infiltrating crypto or the other way around? I guess the optimistic case is that like the current financial elites and the big capital are going to get invested in Bitcoin and become stakeholders and be on our side, but I don't really know.
Oh yeah, and now we have ETFs, and whenever we look at the price, we have to check the news to see what's happening on US markets and stuff like this. It became too mainstream, too fast. I guess most people didn't have the time to process how fast all of this happened. And right now we just woke up with BlackRock and Michael Saylor and whatever just telling us what Bitcoin should be and saying, oh, medium of exchange is a distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to get into the whole fork with Bitcoin Cash because ideologically they're very different and they say Bitcoin should be used as a medium of exchange. But back in the day, did you perceive Bitcoin as a way to save or as a way to send money to other people?
Both. In the early days, you didn't, like the transaction capacity was not really a problem. Usually there was zero fee when you were sending Bitcoins. Or maybe there was some like hard-coded. Oh yeah, in one of my emails with Satoshi, I was wondering, I sent 10,000 Bitcoins, but it ended up sending 10,000.2. So what is the 0.2? And it was some hard-coded transaction fee for large transactions. But yeah, usually you could transact for free in the early days.
Yeah, and that was, if you read Andreas Antonopoulos' book, Mastering Bitcoin, he was speaking at the time in the foreword, I think it in a later edition. No, how do you put it? An older edition. He was talking about free transactions, and with Bitcoin you can move money for free all around the world. And of course it was a narrative at the time. It was not sustained by technical realities or economics within the network. But I guess where I'm standing right now, and I want to ask you about sidechains, if you think that there's anything interesting about them, because I'm also sponsored by Layer 2 Labs, and they do have a proposal with drive chains, and I think they're great for the mission. I've also have my concerns about what this means for miners, because there is a lot of talk about MEV and mining centralization and how they're going to react when they have new incentives with fees coming from outside of the Bitcoin blocks. But what do you think about this concept of sidechains which are enforced by miners?
I'm not really familiar with the whole topic to give a really informed opinion. But I guess we're of course gonna have to move stuff out of the layer 1 in one way or another.
I agree with this, and sometimes when people say that Bitcoin is fine and they should use, I mean, I don't want to shit on Fediment because they do some cool stuff technologically, but it's a bank. It's a bank that they say anyone can open, but in reality it's going to get centralized at one point. You're going to have humans.
Because if the governments are going to censor all the big actors, but not like the small community banks. I don't know.
Well, my point is that I want people to be able to hold their own keys if they want. And if it becomes too expensive, there should at least be a sidechain where they can do this, as opposed to telling them, oh, it's too late for you to afford to use your own keys. Why don't you go on this Fediment? And you have to trust that the community bank is not going to steal your funds.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can trust your community bank, the people you meet in everyday life, at least for some small amounts, and have your savings in layer 1 or something.
You come from a high trust society, I think, and you look at your neighbors and you think that they're nice, but if you look at the third world country, and there's a lot of talk about these places of the world, and there's a lot of virtue signaling, and they say, oh, the global south, I think that's the way that it's being defined. And they say, yeah, they're gonna want to look up to these leaders who are part of the community and so on. But honestly, I think, I don't want to speak bad stuff about anyone in particular, but I do think that some of these community leaders are gonna see themselves with a lot of money, and they're going to say, oh, I can finally go and live my life in Switzerland or something, and never be seen again by their peers. So it's a major concern, and there's no way to mitigate this other than falling back on law enforcement. So basically using the state as the security for this money system, which, you know, it was not supposed to be like this. I remember, I'm going to ask you about this also, but I remember I had an interaction with Luke Dash Jr. and I asked him, what do you think about Liquid? Which is not really a sidechain, it's more like a federation. And he told me it's much better than a sidechain because if someone steals from you, at least you have a few companies to sue to get your money back. And I was like, so is this really the security model that we have right now? You don't, it's not cypherpunk, you know, you have to go to the states and ask for justice as opposed to having cryptography and having computer networks and stuff like this.
Yeah, I guess it's not perfect, but it's better than having USD in the bank, I guess. At least you can challenge the money printing monopoly.
Citrea brought the first ZK rollup to Bitcoin and is now building a Bitcoin-backed economy that is EVM compatible with an extended suite of financial services that use the Bitcoin main chain to store only the basic smart contract data, while everything else from lending, borrowing services to privacy protocols will get built on layer 2 modules. Learn more about Citrea at citrea.xyz and try their Bitcoin testnet applications today. No One's is the ultimate peer-to-peer exchange, serving more than 236 countries and aiming to empower the global south. It also offers a great place to buy and sell gift cards, and there's also a No One's Visa card for spending your coins at millions of merchants worldwide. Want to trade your coins? There's a spot exchange feature too. And the system is designed in a way that allows everyone to get a cut. As CEO Ray Youssef says, on noons.com, everyone gets a seat at the table and everyone eats.
So, do you remember in the first year of Bitcoin, the order of the people who joined? Because there were quite a few developers. There was Mike Hearn, if I'm not mistaken, who joined in that first year. I think Greg Maxwell was also around. And a bunch of others. Do you remember how they came along and what were, I don't know, any memories about them?
No, I don't really remember them from the forum days. I met Mike Hearn in Switzerland 2014 maybe or so. But I don't really remember about the forum things. Like until the WikiLeaks thing, the forum was pretty quiet and you could read all the new posts on the forum every time you signed in. But after that, not so much. WikiLeaks kicked the hornet's nest, as Satoshi said, and the swarm is headed towards us.
Yeah, and that's when he left, right?
I don't recall the exact timeline. Could have been.
Well, what's your impression of Satoshi? Because in some statements that you made, someone can take them out of context and say, oh, this guy must be Satoshi. But did you perceive him as being this Japanese man or American or some nerds in his mom's basement or someone old?
Yeah, I guess the name and on some profile he said he's from Japan. First I thought he's from Japan. He's a Japanese guy. But I had my doubts because his English was so good. Actually, when Dorian Nakamoto was outed, so to say, I first thought this is how I thought Satoshi to look like this. And I guess it's a good picture of Satoshi in our minds.
A lot of people in memes, they use that image for Satoshi still. But for Dorian, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sorry for him.
So your mental image was that of a Japanese man, but not really Japanese because he was too good at English.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think I read something similar that Gavin Andreessen said, that he thought it was a young man from Japan.
I didn't think he was young, maybe. I thought he was older than me, like in his 40s or something.
Interesting. It's really wild how you just Googled something, peer-to-peer cash or whatever, and you stumbled upon Bitcoin, which means that the page was pretty well indexed by search engines.
Yeah, and at that time, when you Googled for Bitcoin, there was just like one page of results. It's pretty interesting.
I do recall, I think the first blog post about Bitcoin, or one of the first, was written by Zuko, the creator of Zcash. Was he involved in any way?
I don't think he was involved in the early days, as far as I know. Maybe he was on the Bitcointalk forums at some point.
Did you meet anyone in person from the Bitcointalk forum except for Mike Hearn?
No, not really. Bitcoin was only in the online world for me for a very long time. Then maybe I might have attended some small meetups in Finland later, like 2013 or whenever Bitcoin hit $1,000. There was some meetup in Finland that I went to. Other than that, I went to Bitcoin Amsterdam 2014. It was surreal how big Bitcoin had become. Like it had been only on the Bitcointalk forums and IRC or wherever for me before that. And then there was everyone. I met the Kraken guys there, and BitPay was there, and many people were there.
So what was the last contribution that you made? When did you stop being a Bitcoin developer?
I might have made some commits to the code base maybe in 2010. I'm not quite sure. Could have been earlier. 2009 is when I made most of my contributions, I think. Then I maintained the forums for a while and bitcoin.org. Then I needed a real job and I had less time to work on anything Bitcoin related. And later, I just didn't. It wasn't interesting to me in any way to continue managing the stuff. And it was getting like political. People were sending me messages like what I should and what I should not put on the bitcoin.org page and whatever. I'm not interested in that at all.
So that sucks.
Yeah.
So who took on that duty? Tamos or?
Tamos continued with Bitcointalk forums, and I gave on the bitcoin.org domain.
You used to own it?
Yeah.
And now, who is it, Cobra?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I cannot go into details about that. I don't want to.
But was it just like a friendly share, or did you get paid, or?
No, I did not get paid. I'm not going into details, but I did not sell the domain.
It's funny because you basically had the keys to one of the most valuable domains in the world.
I don't know. I guess it's valuable for scams or something if you were a scammer. But I think domain names are shitcoins. They can be taken away from you. They're centralized and hierarchical. And they're just someone's website, and you should always verify your code, your binaries that you download, and be mindful of your sources.
Speaking of domain names being shitcoins, were you into Namecoin? Were you around when that emerged?
Yeah, I saw it. I think Namecoin might have been the first altcoin around. I never used it, but it was on my radar.
I guess that's why it wasn't successful. Too many people were into Bitcoin, but not into Namecoin. And it was merge mined with Bitcoin. So if it became successful, transaction fees could go to the Bitcoin miners to increase their revenue.
Yeah, but I think naming should be done with Web of Trust or with social graph. Like maybe we don't need globally unique names. We could have just like a drop-down search as on social media. You want to see Wasabi wallet page, and you just type Wasabi and it fills in from your social graph, like the verified by your friend's account.
Yeah, you mentioned Wasabi, and I just remembered that the guys I'm going to interview after this, and this is backstage details, are from hodling.ch. They're from Switzerland, and they offer this service. They're also sponsors. They offer this service to help you set up your own self-custody solution. Maybe there are people with a lot of Bitcoin or companies that want to start adding Bitcoin to their reserves, and they don't know how to manage this. Someone who owns a lot of Bitcoin doesn't want to hold it in their own house because it's a threat, possibly, especially if they're public about it. And the company doesn't want to have the keys in the hands of a CEO or only one person. who can just do stuff, spend them or whatever. So they're going to consult you into doing your multi-sig. They're going to tell you which hardware wallets you should be using. And they're in Switzerland, so this means they have some privacy that companies from the US don't have. And they don't hold any of your keys. That's very important because there's a company called Casa in the US. And they promise that you never lose your Bitcoin because you give them one key. You keep one and another one can be acquired through two-factor authentication or something. So they don't have access directly to it. You have to request it. I don't know. It's good for some people. It's just not why I got into Bitcoin. Did you stick around to see... Anyway, hodling.ch, check them out. Did you stick around to see the rise of hardware wallets? Because I think that was a major shift in how people manage their Bitcoin.
Yeah, I guess I've always followed on the sidelines, and I did buy a hardware wallet pretty soon after they were available.
Was it the Trezor or BTC chip?
I have various hardware wallets. I don't want to go into detail.
You probably paid like 10 Bitcoin for the Trezor, the metallic one. You did?
No comments.
Yeah. Anyway, at the time, it was the only way you could sustain or support a Bitcoin company. And I spoke with Stick, the co-founder of Trezor, and he told me that the Bitcoin that they got from the pre-sale, because they didn't have all the devices to ship, they sold everything in 2013 to be able to pay for the deliveries and everything. So the price went up and they did not benefit from that price pump. But I'm happy that their business is still around. What did you think about mining pools when they started emerging?
I don't know. I guess I was thinking if it's going to be a centralization risk. But I don't think it's going to be such a... it hasn't been a centralization risk too much. Many of my friends were mining on GPUs as early as 2010, maybe, when I guess that's when the GPU miners came out. Many of my normie friends were mining.
Gamers, right?
Yeah, yes.
Why do you think so early on there was this convergence of hardcore gamers using their GPUs to mine, and nowadays gamers hate Bitcoin and every other cryptocurrency because they perceive this as being the factor why graphics cards became more expensive. But at the same time, gamers are the people who are technically inclined and might like Bitcoin. They're gonna intuitively understand how it works because they probably also use BitTorrent or something else. So why do you think gamers are not really into Bitcoin these days?
I guess Bitcoin is a libertarian thing. Of course, everyone's into Bitcoin if they can mine it like back in the day on their GPUs. Bitcoin doesn't automatically convert people into libertarians, as I've noticed. Many of my Bitcoin miner friends are still social democrat.
So if they mine, they agree to pay taxes on it to the state and think it's helping society somehow?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
That's insane. I mean, they're pretty OG, I guess. They got in early.
Yeah, back when you could solo mine on a GPU. Actually, I even solo mined one block on a GPU at some point, pretty late, when it was still possible.
But it's Finland, I guess, and I did 6 months of exchange in Sweden, and all they did for more than half the time, it was just shoving down our throats the idea of the welfare state. They were saying we're better than the Germans, we're better than everyone else, we're giving everything to everyone, and they took us to this immigrant neighborhood, and they had these people from Syria, if I'm not mistaken, and they were housing them, and they were sending them food, and they were taking their kids to school, and they were giving them everything out of the taxpayers' money, basically.
Yeah.
And the social workers there were still concerned that these people are being marginalized. and they're not part of the center. They're not part of the Swedish culture.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how the hell do I sign up for this? Because I was paying 600 euro for my rent, and it was much shittier than what these people had. And I was thinking, I don't think this scales, and obviously it did not.
Yeah. Scandinavian countries have been successful despite socialism. Well, if you take a look at the economic freedom index, we are actually pretty high on the economic freedom despite the high taxation and whatever. And maybe, I guess, like you said, high trust society, that also helps maybe.
I come from Romania, and we have more of a distrust in government, just like people from here in Czech Republic.
Yeah.
They were invaded by USSR army in 1968.
Yeah.
They brought tanks into this place.
Yeah. I guess in Finland and maybe other Scandinavia, the corruption is on a higher level. It's like legal corruption, legal ways of corruption.
Yeah, it's different. The average person doesn't have access to corruption, but at the high level, you don't really hear about it much because they also control the media. That's another aspect of Scandinavian countries that I don't get. Most of the press, like 90-something%, is subsidized by the government. And they say that they keep them honest so they don't get paid by, evil advertisers from the private sector. But this also means that they're not going to report anything against the powers that be.
Yeah.
So it's hard to be, for example, libertarian news or whatever. Where do you get that in Finland? Do you have any TV channel that's libertarian?
Social media, I guess. There's one libertarian think tank in Finland. But that's about it. And even that has been watered down in the recent years.
But there's the pirate party that came out of Sweden.
Yeah, there was this whole pirate movement, which was inspiring even to me as a 20-year-old computer science student. Pirate Bay. Actually, I even modeled the UI of BitcoinExchange.com after Pirate Bay. It was just like a very similar look and feel.
That's an interesting detail. And I think also the pirate party in Sweden was among the first organizations to use Bitcoin, because it's open source software. They were already into Ubuntu or something.
Yeah.
I went to one of their meetings when I was in Sweden, and they gave me a CD with Ubuntu, and they said, give up on that Windows crap. Use this. I didn't, because I was an idiot. But yeah, they were very advanced from this point of view, very visionary. I hope that some people actually made some money and they can make a change now.
Yeah, I hope so.
Are you still optimistic about Bitcoin, or is it easy to get desolated by the events with ETFs and banks?
I'm optimistic. I don't know if I'm being realistic, but maybe it's like a natural disposition to be optimistic. What else can we do? What's the other alternative?
Well, I guess we can also be pessimistic to the point where we push people to create solutions.
Yeah.
Because right now I think the adjective that people use is bullish, and they say everything is bullish for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The government captures it, it's fine. It means they accept it as money, so we're gonna get rich.
I am a little bit concerned about, of course, maybe the ETF can be our Trojan horse into the financial elite. But maybe I can also see a future where all Bitcoin is KYC'd or outlawed and all that, or something that we might not even imagine.
Is there anything that you would change about Bitcoin if you could? Like if you had magic powers and you could change one parameter?
No, I wouldn't change anything.
No?
No.
Didn't you find it awkward that there are 21 million of them, of coins?
No.
Or that there are 8 zeros?
You just have to pick some number, and Satoshi had his reasons.
Do you know why it's 21?
I cannot give a lecture on it, but I think Satoshi explained it in some of those emails or forum posts.
Is it public?
Yeah.
Can you make a quick summary?
No, I can't. I've had 2 beers already.
Okay. I don't know if someone discovers the forums and wants to get into the first year of Bitcoin. What do you think is a good place to start? What do you think is the highlight of this era?
What do you mean?
Obviously, it's hard to go through everything, even though there wasn't that much. But what do you think is spicy or interesting or exciting to discover from that time?
Well, in the very early days, everyone was idealistic. That's why they were on the forums. It wasn't about making money. That changed maybe sometime in 2010 when my miner friends started flowing in. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means Bitcoin's incentives are right to onboard not just the libertarians. I found the forums nicer in some way, or more comfy or cozy in the early days. Maybe because of the idealism and just that it was a smaller community and nicer. But it was inevitable.
Do you still post on Bitcointalk?
No, haven't posted in a very long time.
Would you make a bridge from Nostr to Bitcointalk or Bitcointalk to Nostr?
I don't think it's up to me. Well, I could make a bridge from Bitcointalk to Nostr, I guess. Could be interesting.
Could be very interesting. Or even a bot to take some old posts and remind people what ideas were being spread around during the early days. Because I guess you have a recollection of these events. And someone who is new to Bitcoin doesn't even know what to search for. They're going to search for some sources, but they're not going to go all the way back to see where this all started. So I think this whole movement of Bitcoin history can be very useful in at least reminding people where this started and what kind of people were involved in this, what kind of ideas they had, and why it became big in the first place.
Yeah, could be interesting if you could make a snapshot of any point in time on the forums, and would be such a nostalgic blast from the past to see like a 2009 version of.
I mean, for you it's nostalgic, but for some people it's something entirely new that they had no idea existed.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit like my emails with Satoshi. They have always been in my mind in some way, but it was interesting to see people's outtakes and reactions. Like, to me, it was always clear that Satoshi is not the CIA when I saw him configuring WordPress with me. Or maybe it was CIA playing 4D chess or something. But yeah, when you read the emails, I guess you get it. Have you read the emails?
I did,
yeah.
But my follow-up question is, have you published everything, or is there still something that you are keeping for later or for destroying?
No, I published everything I have, but as I said in the archive, my email address changed sometime in early 2011, and I don't have backups of the new address.
Mm-hmm. So
I don't have my last emails with Satoshi.
Okay. In a way, it's convenient because basically when he left, maybe he told you something, you don't have it anymore, it's lost. But it's probably for the better.
Could be.
Thank you very much, Marty. It's been an honor and a pleasure. How can people keep up with your work these days? You still work on your Nostr client, Iris?
Yeah. You can go to iris.to/Sirius. Or follow me on Twitter.
You still want people to follow you on Twitter, even though you're using Nostr?
No, don't follow me on Twitter.
Thank you very much, and it's been an honor.
Thank you.
Oh, is there anything else that you do? Some business you want to promote?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. Forgot to ask.